Ford's Theater, forever linked to the tragic assassination of President Abraham Lincoln. But what if I told you that the horror of that fateful night in 1865 was just one chapter in a long history of misfortune? A series of eerie events, from warnings before its opening to deadly disasters long after Lincoln's death, have led many to believe this place is cursed. Let's unravel the chilling mystery of Ford's Theater. Before it became a theater, the site of Ford's Theater was home to the First Baptist Church of Washington. But when John T. Ford purchased the property and transformed it into a venue for entertainment, some saw this as sacrilege. One letter, addressed to Ford, carried an ominous warning: "Do not open this theater. No good will come of it." Another member predicted a dire fate for anyone who turned the former house of worship into a theater. Were these warnings superstitions or prophecies? Ignoring these ominous warnings, on March 19, 1862, John T. Ford opened Ford's Athenaeum with a play called The French Spy. However, on December 30th of that same year, the theater was destroyed by a fire. Despite this, Ford rebuilt the theater and even making it larger and more grand than the original theater. But one has to question whether that tragic fire was foreshadowing of future events at Ford's Theater. Just days before his assassination, Lincoln confided in his wife and close friends about a disturbing dream. In the dream, he wandered the White House at night, hearing the sound of mournful sobbing. When he entered the East Room, he saw a coffin draped in funeral cloth. Soldiers stood guard, and a crowd of people wept. Lincoln asked, "Who is dead in the White House?" A soldier replied, "The president. He was killed by an assassin." Was this just a nightmare, or a warning from beyond? Lincoln himself believed it was a premonition, and just days later, his dream would become reality. Then came the night that sealed Ford's Theater's dark reputation. April 14th, 1865. President Abraham Lincoln attended a performance of Our American Cousin with his wife Mary, and their good friends Major Henry Rathbone and his fiancée Clara. Their evening of entertainment turned to horror when John Wilkes Booth fired a single fatal shot to the back of President Lincoln's head. Major Rathbone tried to apprehend Booth, yet Booth stabbed Rathbone in the arm with a knife. Then, Booth leapt from the box, shouting, "Sic semper tyrannis," before vanishing into the night. The gravely wounded president was carried across the street to the Peterson house. Doctors quickly determined that the bullet, lodged deep in his brain, was inoperable. They kept him comfortable through the night as members of his cabinet, including Secretary of War Edwin Stanton, gathered at his bedside. Lincoln succumbed to his wound at 7:22 a.m. on April 15, 1865. Meanwhile, Booth fled but was tracked down 12 days later to a barn in Virginia, where he was shot and killed. His co-conspirators included Lewis Powell, who attacked Secretary of State William Seward, David Harold, who aided Booth, George Atzerodt, who was assigned to kill Vice President Andrew Johnson, but lost his nerve, and Mary Surratt, who provided logistical support. They, along with others, were arrested, tried, and found guilty. On July 7, 1865, Surratt, Powell, Harold, and Atzerodt were hanged, while others received prison sentences. Following Lincoln's assassination, Ford's Theater was shut down. Some believed it was cursed, too tainted by tragedy to ever host another show. The U.S. government took ownership, converting it into office space for the War Department. In the years following Abraham Lincoln's assassination, Henry Rathbone's mental state deteriorated into paranoia, guilt, and delusions. Haunted by his failure to prevent John Wilkes Booth's attack, he became increasingly unstable, suffering from severe depression and violent outbursts. Despite outward appearances of a successful life, marrying Clara Harris, his fiancée who was also in the box that fateful night, his mind unraveled. By 1883, his paranoia turned deadly. Convinced that his wife was plotting against him, he attacked her with a revolver and dagger, fatally stabbing her before turning the knife on his own children. Though the children survived, Rathbone then attempted suicide, but failed. Declared insane, he was committed to an asylum in Germany, where he spent the rest of his life in isolation, tormented by the ghosts of his past. His story remains one of the darkest, often overlooked tragedies stemming from the night at Ford's Theater. In 1893, disaster struck again at the site of Ford's Theater. On June 9th, without warning, the third floor of the building gave way, sending tons of debris crashing down on the workers below. The collapse killed 22 people and injured 65 more. Survivors spoke of a terrifying moment where the building seemed to groan before caving in. Some whispered that Lincoln's death had cursed the building, dooming anyone who worked there. Today, Ford's Theater has been restored as a National Historic Landmark, including the theater with live performances. It draws thousands of visitors each year and is also known as one of Washington, D.C.'s haunted locations. Actors, park rangers, employees, and guests at Ford's Theater have reported eerie supernatural encounters over the years. Some have claimed to see the apparition of Abraham Lincoln himself, watching performances from the presidential box where he was assassinated. Others have described unexplained cold spots, disembodied voices, and even the faint sound of gunshots echoing through the theater. Employees working late at night have reported feeling an unseen presence, hearing footsteps on empty balconies or witnessing objects move on their own. Park rangers have told stories of shadowy figures lurking in the wings, only to vanish upon closer inspection. Whether it's the lingering presence of Lincoln, John Wilkes Booth, or the residual energy of that tragic night, Ford's Theater remains one of Washington, D.C.'s most haunted sites. Could the tragedies that took place there have left a supernatural mark? What do you think? Is Ford's Theater cursed? Or is it just a place with a tragic past that seemingly rippled through so many lives? If you've enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe to our channel to support us in providing more spooky content about haunted places and things. And check out this next video about another famous haunted landmark in Washington, D.C.